Hello and welcome to a Sonic Labs special. I'm Nick Batt, editor of SonicState.com.
And I'm Gaz WIlliams, a bass player and producer.
And this week what we're looking at is sort of an in-depth in Cubase, because if you're a regular listener to Sonic Talk, our weekly podcast, you'll know that Gaz has been working on various projects using Cubase, right?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, a long-term user of Cubase. First started using it back in 1991.
Really?
So,
last century.
So, I mean, Cubase is something which I think it's a very interesting DAW in terms of having that length of time that it's been around, you know. Subsequent iterations have just increased the functionality, you know, into all
and
sorts.
Especially in the last couple of years, they've really kind of got some really good features in there. We've noticed as well, or you've noticed.
Well, absolutely, yes. And I think what we're going to look at today is some of the more advanced features and ways in which you can integrate Cubase with maybe just like a regular band.
Right.
So,
because ordinarily, you know, what tends to happen is, you know, you have to get messed up, you've got clicks, tracks, and it all starts to go off grid, and then people find the two worlds don't generally mix all that well, live free playing and DAW and, you know, programming.
That's right. I mean, you know, we can think historically, bands over the last maybe 25, 30 years have been increasingly forced to work to click tracks in the studio to keep the tempo in. Now, that can have a musical purpose to keep everything really even, but more often than not, it's to serve the engineers and producers so that they can cut things to the grid, copy and paste and do all that kind of thing. Whereas, you know, a band in a rehearsal room, they won't be working to a click track necessarily.
They just want to jam.
They just want to jam. And then they go into the studio, forced to work to a click track. A lot of the groove, a lot of the feeling, a lot of the human quality in the performance gets eked out. So
you found what we're looking at this time. What are we going to look at?
Well, we're going to look at some of the automatic tempo mapping functions that's in Cubase. I think it's been in since around Cubase 6.5 or thereabouts, but subsequent iterations has refined the process further. And now it works in a fairly straightforward way. So what we're going to look at is, I've got a recording here. This is my band Rocket Gold Star doing literally a free form jam. It's just, you know, we just taking a riff, jamming on the riff in a rehearsal room.
And this was recorded into Cubase?
Yeah, recorded into Cubase. Right. Yeah, no click track, just as though it's recorded onto tape. Just, you know, just
old school
style.
Before we start, what version of Cubase? What are we running on?
Okay, we're running the latest version of Cubase, which is 7.5.3.
Right.
And we're running it on OS X 10.9.4.
And we've got a Mac Pro here.
That's right. So
I keep thinking that I've got to put something in. I've never seen one in the flesh or had one to touch. It's a super dense piece of black stuff, isn't it? Anyway, it works.
Hopefully. So looking at the screen now, here's the project, and we can see the drums are kind of in green, bass is in blue, and guitar is in orange. And it's a multi-track recording, but it is of just a live performance, no overdubs, just straightforward. So let's just have a little listen to what we got. So at the moment, if I was to put the click track in,
it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
So, for instance, if you wanted to cut bar numbers or you know, it would be a nightmare to work with. You want to get it gridded somehow, right?
Exactly. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how we can easily, or hopefully easily, extract the tempo that's inherent in this performance and be able to sort of have Cubase make its grid fit this.
Right.
So there's a function now. So if we were to have a look now in Project and we choose tempo detection. At the moment, we'll notice that it's grayed out. That's because you need to select a particular element.
A reference track.
Yeah, and I pointed that out because I think this is an important thing, because what you need to do is you need to find just a single track which has got the most tempo information. Right. So I generally will use I'll generally use the overhead.
What does that sound like? Can we listen to that in isolation?
Sure. There'll be some spill on it. Let's take a click out.
Okay, so it's not a straight 4/4 groove, is it? I mean, it's there, but it's got quite a lot of incidentals and what have you. Okay.
Yeah. So with that
selected,
back up to Project, I'm going to open this tempo detection panel. So let's have a look in there now. Okay, So at the moment, all the options are grayed out. So we need to analyze it first. So I'm going to click Analyze. Let's just zoom back out again. The display domain will be switched to bars and beats. Okay,
Right.
we want that. The
There it
process. Okay.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
So we got the track down there.
Yeah, I'm going to leave this window open for a moment. And so the tempo track, now if we notice the tempo track, let's just zoom in a little bit on the tempo track, we can notice that it's pretty much every beat. There's subtle variations.
Subtle, I'd like to say it was really tight, wasn't it? You know? It's not wild, it's just subtle.
Yeah, it's subtle. Now, what it doesn't know what the time signature is.
Right.
So it just puts it into 1/4. Just so,
so every beat...
bar is essentially just one beat long.
Okay.
But we can change that, and we'll change that in a moment. But before we do that, well, actually, let's just play.
Wow, so it just nailed it. I mean, looking along the timeline there, there's just no glitches. I mean, it's a fairly constant riff, admittedly, but
That's true.
It's still kind of quite...
It feels quite tight, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. In our tempo detection panel, though, we have got some options should we need them, and one of which, you know, we could say multiply by 2. So if we want to
increase the resolution, right?
Yeah. Or divide by 2. Or we could multiply by 3/4 or multiply by 4/3, which are just ways of you'd experiment.
6/8 or 3/4.
Exactly, yeah. There's also an offbeat correction in case it's worked out where
it's taken the downbeat as an offbeat.
Yeah, so it'll shift it by half a beat.
Like if you were doing a reggae track, for instance, it might have, okay, I see.
And also grayed out is one called smooth tempo. And smooth tempo, if there was big jumps in, it would try and kind of make it a little... but that's grayed out because I think there's not enough tempo variance to do that. Okay, so now... if I wanted to sort of move around on this, I find it a little bit annoying because you can't click on the timeline at the top there because it's all set.
Just zoom in again. So those are little markers. So
yeah, those are markers.
Oh, they're 1 bar mark, right?
Yeah, yeah. So a good little thing to do is to come to Add Track and add a ruler track. Now it's added a little ruler track in here, which is currently set to bars and beats.
Oh, that means you can move the cursor around easily.
It means we can move the cursor, and
that's neat. Yeah.
And it's great this ruler because you can just move it to where you want it to be. So it enables us to, you know. So if I can zoom in.
So you can snap to any one of those 1/4 bars.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I'd want to do then really is set the tempo. In this case, a count of 4. I think it will fit into 4. So I'm going to end our tempo session now, and I'm going to change the time signature into 4/4.
And just a question of typing it in there.
Yep. But what it might not do though is if we were to listen where the downbeat is.
Yeah, it's off, isn't it? It's 1 beat out.
Yeah, 1 beat out. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to make sure that the grid is on bars and beats. I'm going to set it to beat. Actually, that's on triplets. We can set that on 8. And I'm going to, using the pen tool, I'm just going to put in. Actually, I'm going to put that first one back to 1/4.
Right.
What it was, and then I'm going to actually add our 1 bar.
4/4.
1 beat in is 4/4 there. Okay.
Right, so
we'll try that with a click now.
So now we're on.
That's for the downbeat there.
Okay, so we're in business.
We're in business. So that was really quite easy.
Yeah, I must admit. I mean, I remember before there were all sorts of ways that you used to have to do it, like tap tempo along with it.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, you kind of get a drummer to sit there and tap it in, and then it was just, it was a messy business.
Okay, so now in order to sort of to put this into practice, I think what we'll do is we'll get like an instance of Groove Agent SE, which is the built-in sort of drum sampler.
Right.
And we'll get it playing along, and then I think this is where
then we can see the power of it.
We can see the power of it, exactly, yeah. So I'm going to add a track, I'm going to add an instrument track, and I'm going to add in a Groove Agent SE. So Groove Agent SE is actually,
It's like a sort of pad sampler groove.
Yeah,
that plays
but
patterns. It's a complex thing.
It's complex. It's incredibly deep. It's almost like Steinberg's answer to Native Instruments Machine in many ways, because you've got a mixture of patterns and sampling, all within this one plugin. And I think this came in on 7.5, so it's still a relatively new plugin. So here's my library of sounds, and I'll bring in electronic-y Collins kit.
Okay.
Nice.
808 style, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go in, and I'm going to, rather than add in a MIDI pattern, there's a really nifty little sequencer.
Zoom that in?
Yep, so we're going to go into the MIDI inserts in the inspector. And here, there's a whole load of stuff to explore in here. Beat Designer. Now, Beat Designer is a rather nifty step sequencer. And so I'll just start with just 4 on the floor.
Right.
And I'll run the track now. Let's turn the click off. And let's jump back into the beginning of the song.
Right, so it's subtle, you can hear that. So what about if we add like an offbeat hi-hat or something so that we can hear the...
Yeah, let's do something like that.
Right, jazzy. But I can hear that fits, so effectively we're programming along with a pre-tempo map live jam.
Yep.
I mean, those words sound like fairly meaningless, but actually that's a really big deal, isn't it?
I think it's a huge deal. I mean, us musicians have been slave to the computer grid for so long. This is like the musician fight back. We've got control of the grid.
I think the thing about this is, in other DAWs, it is entirely possible to do these things as well, but there is a sort of seamlessness to this. The ability to be able to add programming to a live track always used to be a real, it's actually quite a lot of work, quite a lot of fiddling and kind of always just in and out. So we got basically a 1-bar pattern that is just following the tempo all the way along, and that's kind of cool.
And, and as we listen to it, you might want to play with the shuffle settings or a few things if you wanted to just maybe but it has literally taken seconds to achieve this.
And I guess also the other thing that we can do is we can also slice and edit to bar points and beats, which makes moving sections around and what have you much easier to deal with.
Absolutely. So, copying and pasting any parts onto it, they're going to conform to our...
I guess the only thing that you need to do there is you'd have to move the tempo map along with it. Is that kind of difficult or complicated? Because you have to move the tempo with the audio for that to work properly. So that might make things a little more complicated, I'm guessing.
Well, if you make a selection and say I was to make a time selection, but if the time selection, if we moved it, say, over here,
right.
It's moved
the tempo.
Yeah, because I had it selected.
Right.
Yeah. If I just moved the content without the tempo map, it wouldn't take the tempo map with it.
So what about, that's a fairly sort of simple demonstration of how that might work. What about if we wanted to work on something slightly more complicated and something that was more difficult? Clearly he didn't have any difficulty with that.
No, and I suppose in a way this is the groove was fairly consistent. So it gave the tempo detection, a relatively easy job. I've got another jam from the same session that is a different kettle of fish now. So let's have a listen to this first. And so this is right.
Right, yeah, I can have that's got gaps in the rhythm and the guitars are playing triplets. Good luck with that.
Okay.
So what would you normally you would take the overhead, right?
Yeah, well let's see what happens when we take the overhead. I'm going to grab it and project, tempo detection, analyze. Okay.
There it goes.
There's the process. Multiple tempos.
Can we zoom in so we can read that?
Yeah. Multiple tempos were detected in the selected audio event. Tempo events are only generated up to the point where a major tempo change was detected. Okay.
Oh, so that's actually a feature. So if you get to a point where something radically changes, it allows
but
you
look
to...
what's happened here.
Right.
It hasn't got very far.
Right.
So if we turn on the click track and then have a little listen to sort of to see how that.
Oh, I see. It's trying to get the... Yes, it's trying to get the boom and the snare to go to one and... One and... Oh, yeah, right, okay.
So what we'll do, I think, in this case...
So that's a fail.
That's a fail, because I think the drums didn't have enough tempo information because of the breaks in the thing.
Okay.
However, the guitar is kind of doing a sort of...
Yeah, it's keeping time, isn't it? So we'll try that.
So we'll do that on the guitar instead now. Okay, so I'm going to select the guitar, and then the same thing, project, tempo detection, analyze. Okay.
Just bearing in mind, this is a super fast Mac Pro. I mean, obviously there's a 6-minute jam going on here, but that does take a little bit of time to analyse. Right, so...
Well, it's got a lot further this time, but not far enough. But let's have a look what happens.
It's taking the offbeat, hasn't it?
Yeah, so now our offbeat correction.
Right, that's pretty impressive, actually.
Let's see what happens though when it gets to the section where it can't. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit.
Can we bring the tempo mat up a bit? It's probably going to be a bit difficult to zoom in a bit.
So it got as far as there. So with my tempo map tool, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of click.
Give it a clue.
Give it a clue and...
Oh, and it's just sort of suddenly gone on.
It has gone on. There's some interesting bits coming up. But let's just see how that's working now.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's got it, essentially.
Seems pretty good. So you do have to get your hands dirty a little bit, but this is a
impressive...
Yeah, in this particular case, this jam is kind of
very
going
freeform.
So
I mean, we've seen the way of adding programming to a tempo map.
Yeah.
What other applications could we do? So could we, for instance, now take? I mean, if we go back to the beginning of the tune, and go right, could we actually straighten out the rest of the tune based on the average tempo, and just kind of essentially quantize the audio or conform it to a specific tempo? Say we wanted to get on grid, and you know.
Yeah. Okay. So. This is a good thing with the tempo map. Now, obviously, the end of it we haven't sorted out.
Okay,
the first part of it is...
Let's concentrate on this first part.
The tempo map Cubase can learn a lot about the contents from the tempo map. So, for instance, here, if we were to go to our audio and advanced... right, first, actually, I'm going to just select all. Audio, advanced. Now, we can say set definition from tempo. And what that means is that the information, those audio files information...
Like the transients.
We're setting the definition from tempo, meaning that it's the bar count is going to follow our tempo map.
Right, okay.
Of each of the parts.
Right.
So we'll click that. Okay, so here's our little window. Save definition in project only or write definition to audio file. So
I guess if you didn't want to affect your original files, you choose project only, and then you've got a sort of, I guess, a branch.
Exactly.
So yeah. Which is a good idea, because then you can always revert, can't you?
Yeah. Set all tracks to musical time base is also what we want in this case, because if it was not set to that,
So is that doing stuff now, is it, or is it just done it?
No, it's doing it at the moment. We're gonna get the spinning wheel because it's got a lot of processing.
So it's processing 11 tracks.
Yeah, of about 6 minutes each.
Right. So this is where obviously the more powerful computer you've got, the less time it'll take.
It still takes time on this one.
It's a shame they use a spinning beach ball, because a beach ball tends to indicate something is wrong. Whereas if it was actually an hourglass, then we'd kind of go, oh, that's fine.
That's okay.
Don't panic. Everything's all right.
It is that beautiful coloured that beautiful coloured spinning ball.
The beach ball of death.
Of death, yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, it does take a bit of time.
So now it's done.
Done. Okay.
That was probably what, about 40 seconds, something like that.
Yeah. So now.
So we've still got the tempo map in place, right?
Yeah, our tempo. Let's go fixed tempo. 120 BPM.
So now suddenly,
Yeah.
from a sort of loose tempo, just take the click out. It sounds like you've been rehearsing for ages and you've nailed it and you've played along with the click track, and the drummer sounds awesome. Not that he isn't.
You'll like that. Okay, this is 80 BPM.
So you can hear time stretch artifacts coming in there, but that is a very extreme. That's like So if we would set it to maybe 110 or something.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, the perception of how we've actually now tightened that right up.
Yeah.
So using this tempo detection and the groove and the mapping, we're able to work in both ways. So I mean, the thing that I find really interesting is I could now, we can map the tempo of a live jam. We can add a load of parts for somebody who maybe isn't an overdubber, who is somebody who is a step programmer or works on short sections of a time at a time. This makes the creative process to add to a live jam just seamless, right?
And something I did the other day was just nice. I was working with a acoustic guitarist, and his drummer came along, and he played in the same room as the guitarist was playing, but kind of quiet and out of the range of the microphone. And I recorded.
And you got a tempo map.
And then I extracted the tempo map from that, and then we got a click track then that was just beautiful, and the guitarist. He didn't have to compromise, he didn't have to have headphones on.
Right, that's interesting.
So this is great now. This allows you to be able to...
I mean, there are other DAWs and there are other processes for this, but
Absolutely.
I mean, has this been, how does it compare?
I've never used anything remotely as fast as this in terms of it being, almost
musical.
Yeah, very musical. I mean, as we noticed with that kind of free-ranging jam, you start to realise there
are limitations.
The limitations to the algorithm, but the actual editing tools are very nice and easy to use. So, I think it's maybe asking too much to wave your magic wand, but it comes close.
And I suppose the other thing is you could easily use it. You can use it to sync off other devices. So presumably, you can get Cubase to send out clock or whatever and synchronize maybe other analog clock-based devices so that they will follow along as well.
Talking.
I mean, there's all sorts of...
Yeah.
Right.
So as I was mentioning earlier, musicians having control of the grid, I just think is, a phenomenally exciting idea, really.
Great.
Yes. So...
Okay, so that brings this episode to a close. I want to say thank you very much to Gaz WIlliams for showing us the finer points of tempo detection and how it kind of melds musicians and the grid together in such an effective way.
Yeah, fantastic.
And remember, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. There'll be a button appearing. We do produce lots and lots of video content. We have a weekly Sonic Talk podcast, as well as tutorials like this and reviews and all of that. So do subscribe.